time.
Coming countdown control. The liquid hydrogen vent valve has been closed and flight pressurization is underway.
To Geek Time.
Mark and counting.
If you know how to give the Vulcan hand sign, if you've never kissed a girl or tasted wine, if you write all your papers in Linux, then you know it's Geek Time. If you still live with your parents and you're 38 years old, you got a pocket protector and you blog about having a cold. It's Geek Time. Can't wait to get an iPad. It's Geek Time. You're like Vogel and Superbad. It's Geek Time. You got a coffee mug warmer and an Iron Man mask. It's Geek Time. You dress up and go to Comic-Con. It's Geek Time. You know all the lines from Wrath of Khan. It's Geek Time. You like asteroids and shiny droids and iPhones. It's Geek Time. Time to get a life. It's Geek Time. You will never get a wife. It's Geek Time.
The next generation.
Technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Welcome to Geek Time, the next generation. Hosted by Chris Bors.
Don't cross the stream.
Make it so.
And Tim Warner.
Never tell me the odds.
Bringing you all things geek-worthy from the world of pop culture.
Get to the chopper!
All right, welcome back to Geek Time, Season 1, Episode 5. I can't believe we're at Episode 5 already. Wow. But we've got a great episode for you today that you do not want to miss. We've got an upcoming guest coming in. His name is Matthew Schofield. And if you watch The Simpsons, he is the current animation director for that show. So you don't want to miss it.
Awesome.
So, all right, as you know, we start the show with our freaking out or geeking out.
Geeking out or freaking out.
And I'll go ahead and start. So my geeking out is that I heard a few months ago that they're making this Batman museum of the based on the 1960s TV show.
Yeah, you sent pictures. Yeah, it looks pretty sweet.
Yeah, and I just found an article this week saying that it's finally open, and I saw these guys made a road trip out there, and I was like, where is this museum at? I had no idea, and turns out it's like 3 hours from where I live. So I'm geeking out over that. I'm like, I have got to make a road trip to go there. I have to see this museum
Holy
for
crazy
myself.
road trip, Batman.
It's just, I love that series, and they made a replica of the Bat Cave. They made a replica of the Wayne Manor study with the desk and the bat phone, and I'm like, I gotta go.
They better have a souvenir shop where you can buy shark repellent. That's all I'm saying, man.
Yeah, for a future episode, I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna see if I can get an interview with the guy that runs the place, because I think he would. I think it'd be a fascinating story to talk about, what went into this. And
yeah,
so hopefully for a future episode of Geek Time, we can make that happen.
That would be sweet.
So, all right, Tim, what's your geeking freaking out?
So I have a geeking out and a freaking out this week. The Russos supposedly are in contract talks to head up the future X-Men post-Secret Wars stuff. So after
The
Secret
Russo
Wars,
brothers?
the Russo brothers, yeah.
Wow.
That makes me really excited because my favorite stuff in the Marvel Universe has always been the Russo brothers stuff. The Captain America, that's always been some of my favorite stuff. For all I know, it could just be hearsay. But man, cross my fingers. If that's the truth, man, that's going to really be exciting to have them head up the X-Men stuff.
Yeah, I always liked their vision because they seem to honor what was, and they know how to handle an ensemble cast, it seems.
Yes.
And you need both those things for
X-Men.
This franchise.
100%.
Yeah.
That was one of the problems with the X-Men movies of Fox, was that they kind of, once they started getting so many characters, you could tell they were just like, they didn't know what to do. So it's like kill this one off or have this one sidelined for a minute. And one of the cool things about like Infinity War or even Captain America Civil War is that you get so many different character arcs, character moments that come into that movie to where if you ask yourself like, well, who's it mostly about? You could give me like 6 characters that it's about.
See, I love the cartoon X-Men in 97 or
Yes.
whatever they're calling it now. I feel like they could really bring the franchise back to what that whole thing was. And I have no idea which characters they'll probably place into this. I don't know if they want to stay true to the original comic where it's just the 5 and then Wolverine jumps in at some point, or if they want to do like an exact copy from the cartoon. But I'm fine either way. And if it's in the hands of Russo brothers, because I remember they said, somebody asked them a while ago, would you like to do the Superman franchise? And they're like, oh yeah. And they gave their vision of that. They're like, we would like to do a period piece Superman where you take it back to the 1930s, 40s, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is a awesome idea. I would love to see Superman done in that vein. So
yeah, that's how I wanted to kind of do it. And
right. All right, let's get to your freaking out.
so my freaking out is another rumor that I heard that this is not a good one. And that is that, so Captain America Brave New World comes out next month. And the freaking out I have is supposedly the Red Hulk, who's in all the trailers, only shows up for like 5 minutes of the movie. That's the rumors I'm hearing.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. So we might have another Amazing Spider-Man Rhino scenario here where they'll probably resolve it at least. They won't end and go to the
if that
credits.
happens, I'm calling foul because he is all in those trailers. They
Yep.
made it seem like this big thing. Like if that is going to be one major ball drop if that's
And
the
you know
case.
what? I totally see it happening because I'm looking at the trailer and I'm like, we got to get to Red Hulk. So I was like, well, he's not showing up till the 3rd act anyway. And it's a trap. And then all of a sudden you're gonna have Red Hulk show up at the end for a big Marvel kind of fight. I see it happening, and I'm with you. I don't like that. I think it's kind of a bait and switch, and that does not.
Yeah, good point.
For a movie that and I'll kind of talk about it a little later too.
You know what? It's like if we're gonna go that route, why don't we just subvert our expectations?
But you subverted expectation.
With Rain Johnson.
Oh yeah, let's bring in Ryan Johnson.
I didn't realize he was the director of this.
Oh God.
All right, so let's get to some geek news and notes here. All right, so the main thing I want to talk about today, and I keep seeing it in a bunch of articles, Gremlins 3. I know, Tim. You and I have both lobbied for this for years. I want to see Gremlins 3. It's happening. They said Chris Columbus has a script. It's been ready for a while, and now they're sprucing it up. If you go to, I can't remember where it is, but some like in production type website in Warner Brothers somewhere, it says Gremlins 3 is now in production. So here we go.
Is Joe Dante alive?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
I really want him to direct it if it could make it happen. Man, yeah, but Gremlins 3, this is like my childhood growing up. I was a kid when Gremlins 2 came out. Look, this is an embarrassing moment, but I actually wrote a script. Okay, it's lost somewhere at a time, probably in the garbage somewhere, some landfill probably in Ohio.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
The thing is, I don't know where they're going to go from here because Gremlins 1 was kind of like a borderline horror movie. And then you get to Gremlins 2 and boy, they really took it down to like a kid's level because that movie was just bonkers.
Gremlins 1 is a straight up spoof. Joe Dante was spoofing It's a Wonderful Life. From the small little town, it was, Bedford Falls for It's a Wonderful Life. All the little tropes, even the old woman who had all the money and was a real, bitch, that was a joke on Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, the whole thing was a spoof of it. But Gremlins 2 was Joe Dante just being like, I'm going to just make just a spoof of a spoof. I'm going to go crazy with it. I mean, you got Gremlins that turned into flying bats. You've got talking awesome. Gremlins.
I go back and watch that movie now. It stands out to me. I feel like it's a great movie. that
Yes.
captured the
And then Hulk
sign of the
Hogan
times.
shows up to turn the movie back on again. It's bonkers nuts, man. I love that movie. But it's one of those things where if you really wanted to go in and get a serious Gremlins 2, like you weren't going to get it. But my God, that movie is it's hilarious to me how far they take it and stuff. It's great. I've always said if I had a $1 billion, I would literally take a freaking bulldozer truck of money over to Joe Dante to just dump in front of his house and be like, finish it, make it happen. I don't care. I want Gremlins.
Back up the Brinks truck, baby.
Hey, Moose, Rocco, help the judge find his checkbook, will you?
Yeah, so that's why I'm curious what direction they're going to go with the third one. Are they going to make it serious, kind of slapsticky, maybe a combination of the two? But yeah, and is Zach? I can't remember how you say his last name.
I wanted to say Galifianakis, but that's the guy from The Hangover.
I know. I was going to say the same thing.
Zach. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're right.
I'm curious if he's
Billy
going to play a role.
That was his character name. Is Billy Peltzer coming back?
Billy. Hey, Billy.
Hey, Billy.
I just remember the girl always saying his name. Billy. All right, so moving on. So we have a new Superman trailer that dropped. Did you end up getting to watch that?
To see it. Yep.
I think I'm more leaning towards wanting to really see this movie now because it just, I think it painted the picture in a better light where it seems like they're setting up this storyline where Lex Luthor is trying to figure out, okay, what is Superman's weakness?
Mm-hmm.
And he gets to the point where, it's kryptonite. Yeah. And so I'm curious how that's all going to play out, and it looks interesting. So I'm down for that.
As much as like people say, "Oh, I don't want an origin story," you've got to do stuff in your new universe to explain what kryptonite is, what Lex Luthor is, all the stuff that you as even the normies who aren't even comic book readers know. But we still have to do it in order to get a good base of our universe that we're going to do.
So in other news, I guess Ryan Reynolds is doing a John Candy movie, which this is a big surprise, but bravo. I can't wait to see a John Candy movie because another icon of the 1980s. Always loved his movies.
How's he doing this? John Candy's dead.
They're doing like a documentary type style. They're going to go through all his movies.
I didn't know about this. He's doing a documentary on John Candy. That would be awesome. I love John Candy. So,
I guess he's a huge John Candy fan, and I just can't wait to see him get into all the movies that he was in because so many iconic movies: Planes, Trains, Automobiles, Summer Rental, Uncle Buck.
Yeah, so many movies that are quotable and things that like I think of like whenever I'm at a steakhouse, I'm always thinking the old 96er from The Great Outdoors, I mean, or whenever I stay at like a hotel in like a summer place, I'm always thinking of the scene where he comes back to his place he's renting in summer rental, and everybody's taking over his house, his place, and I always think about just like these little things in John Candy movies that have stayed the test of time.
So on that note, Eugene Levy was actually interviewed on Geek Time in, I think it was 2011, 2012. So I pulled a clip. I want to play this clip where he talks about John Candy. I thought this was fascinating because this is how big of a star John Candy was. If you didn't grow up in the 1980s, he was huge. So here's a little clip of how huge he was.
He was so funny, and what John had was kind of transcended the screen. People loved him. Loved John Candy. I mean, when John died in 1994, they closed the 405 freeway. We were on our way down to we were in the funeral kind of procession going down to the, whatever you call that, not the cemetery type place. And we looked around. We were in the car, and there was a lot of the kind of the pallbearers that were there at the funeral. And we looked around. Somebody said, "Look at that! Look out the window." And we looked out the window and realized there's no traffic on the 405 freeway. We said, "Oh my God, this is like there's not a car on the road. They've closed the road." And as we're looking at all the off ramps, we see the cops holding the traffic up onto the off ramps. And so we get to the cemetery, and I happened to say to one of the cops that was standing there, I said, "Boy, they closed the freeway. I can't believe they closed the freeway, because normally you've got to travel in traffic if you're going to the thing." He said, "Well, that's a decision that's made by the the LAPD and the California Department of Highways, and the only other times they've closed the freeway was for a presidential cavalcade and when the Pope came to visit. That was it.
Wow. Yeah.
So people loved John Candy. You know, the cops, I mean, they just loved him. He just transcended.
I will present that entire interview in a future episode of Geek Time. It's a great interview. So yeah, we'll get to it one day. And I can't wait till that documentary comes out. All right, so last week I reported that Diamond Comic Distributors was facing a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and I contacted my contact over at Diamond to see if he could come on and do an interview this week, and he wrote me back. He said, thanks for the opportunity, but he basically said, I can't talk about it, and I'm not sure that people that can are willing to give interviews, but things may still work out, and I may continue to produce stuff under the toy line. So there you go. That's an official response.
Yeah, if they're filing Chapter 11, they're probably getting some checks from the government, and the government's probably doesn't want them to talk about anything, and they don't want to talk about anything because if it ruins their chances of getting any money from this, if they were to breach contracts or something along those lines. So it's understandable that no one's going to talk about this just yet.
Right, but what's interesting is they are still going to be at Toy Fair, which is March 1st. And I will be at Toy Fair doing a lot of reporting, and I will try to get somewhat more of a response from them when I see them live in person, but stay tuned for that. All right, well, that does it for the first segment of Geek Time. We're going to take a little break here, and then we'll be back with our Simpsons animation director on Geek Time.
Technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Geek Time continues transmitting next with
Matthew Schofield.
All right, guys, so if you're a fan of the Irate Gamer series on YouTube, which was my flagship show, they are now available on Blu-ray. I finally did the first 2 volumes, and you can get the first, 80 episodes on 2 volume sets. So it's quite the nostalgic overload for all you guys.
Nice.
So the first edition has 61 episodes in all, contains seasons 1 through 6. The second set contains seasons 7 and 8, which contains over 3-4 hours of content, bonus features, all that good stuff. And if all goes well, I'll have the third set being worked on this summer, which will contain seasons 9 and 10.
Plus,
so
Ronnie the Skeleton's going to do commentary, right?
Ronnie the Skeleton is there in all his glory, even in bloopers and bonus scenes and all that good stuff. So if you want that, go to Ghost Dr. Chris. That's where they are available for sale. Oh, I want to get my Irate Gamer sets. All right, Tim. So one of the sponsors of the show is McFarlane Toys. They sent me a big case of Batman toys from Batman Forever. And, this was a movie, I know it gets a lot of crap now, but back in the day, I enjoyed this movie. No, it wasn't Tim Burton, but
better than Batman and Robin.
But I gotta say, McFarlane did an amazing job, as you come to expect with McFarlane. The sculpts are amazing with Batman, Robin, Riddler, Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face.
And Tommy Lee Jones was there.
Yes, and of course, like I said, they sent me the wrong Batmobile. I did not want the glow-in-the-dark one. I wanted the one that came with Alfred. So there's an exclusive figure there. There's a Build-A-Figure of the Man-Bat equivalent of that bat that flies in the dream sequence. Right. So that's pretty cool. I put that thing together, and I'm just having a great time, especially with the Schumacher Batmobile. I got the wrong one, but it's still incredible.
It's probably my second favorite Batmobile, too.
I went back and watched that movie. The Batmobile only got 1 minute of screen time, which is a shame because can you imagine how long it took to make that Batmobile? I would be mad if I was the sculptor.
That's ridiculous. I think that Batmobile has actually lasted the test of time. What was it? The Arthur movie with Russell Brand? The beginning of the movie, he starts with him stolen the Batmobile or whatever. And I think
I didn't see that. That's funny.
Schumacher Batmobile. I think it's that Batmobile.
Oh, so cool.
I
okay.
feel like I feel like that Batmobile is iconic, and it is definitely one that would be awesome with your collection.
Yeah, so if you're interested in the McFarlane toys, make sure you go to the website. They've got a store there, or you can check out for them on Amazon. You can find them at Targets and Walmarts.
This is Zach Galligan. You may remember me as Billy from the Gremlins. Go ahead and listen to Geek Time, but just not after midnight.
All right, welcome back to Geek Time. Thank you, Zach. And he was once on the Irate Gamer show, which was a great Gremlins video game review that I did. But now we're shifting gears, and I'm excited to present this next guest here on Geek Time.
Geek Time proudly welcomes a man that's worked on the longest-running animated series in TV's history. He is our window into the world of Springfield, the Simpsons animation director, Matthew Schofield.
All right, Matthew, thanks for being a guest on Geek Time here.
You're welcome. Than's for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. Now, you're the animation director for The Simpsons, correct?
I was one of the animation directors. Like, I was an episode director, and currently I'm the supervising storyboard director. So I now work on every episode at the storyboard stage. I supervise the storyboard crews on every episode, just to make sure that the story's being told in the best and most effective way, that all the jokes are hitting, and any dramatic moments achieving the required amount of pathos and emotional connection with the viewer and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So, and you've been with them for about 20 years, correct?
I've been on the show since 1999. So This is actually my 26th year on the show.
Wow. So that
crazy to think about.
Wow. Yes. We're on season 9, correct?
I started on season 11.
So now, being someone that is in charge of the story, I've noticed when they first started, episodes were about 22 minutes in length, but now it's like 20 minutes. I'm sure it's slipped from there. I'm sure it's very challenging now to do a full story within that time frame.
You'd be surprised. I mean, it all comes down to the script writing, and we do, as you've said, it's now, I think the broadcast length on the shows is 20 minutes, 50 seconds of actual content. And then, they add commercials and stuff. Usually the scripts that we first get to storyboard from, it all comes down to the script writing, and they're a little bit over that time. And then from our storyboards, we show that to the writers so that they can get an idea of, well, here's how much screen time the script that you wrote is actually going to take up. And if the storyboard animatic that we present to them is, say 23 minutes, then they know, like, oh, okay, we've got to go back in to our script and cut out 3 minutes worth of stuff. So that's, it's sort of a back and forth process between our crew on the animation side and the writer's room to get the show down to the correct broadcast length, but still not sacrifice any important story beats for each episode. Yeah.
Now, I've been a Simpsons fan from the beginning. I remember when the Christmas episode first aired, I think it was 1990. And ever since then, I just loved it. And then I remember they did an episode. It was like a behind the scenes with the Phil Hartman character where they showed outtakes and deleted scenes and things like that. So when they came out with the DVD releases, they gave us more of that, where it's like, oh yeah, all this stuff has been cut for time and things like that. And I remember one of the things they cut was so fantastic. It was like the robotic Richard Simmons. I don't know if you recall that, but I'm sure there are so many things that get cut there. You're like, oh, I wish I could have stayed in.
Yeah, a lot of stuff gets cut. Interesting thing, on one of the episodes that I worked on when I was in character layout, that's where I started on the show, was as a character layout artist, which is essentially a rough animator. I animated a whole sequence of Bart playing Little League, and then it was cut. And then I was surprised to find that whole sequence was put into another episode. And I think it was just sort of modular enough that sequence could just be standalone and could sort of slot into any episode story because it was just this self-contained little gag sequence of Bart playing Little League. So yeah, there's tons of stuff that gets cut out. Really cool stuff, actually. I remember when I was co-directing the Halloween show Treehouse of Horror 20, and that had a Alfred Hitchcock parody. It's in black and white, and originally that script contained a parody of the sequence from Psycho where the woman in the story goes down into the basement to find Norman's mother, and she turns around the rocking chair, and spoilers for Psycho if you haven't.
Spoiler alert.
There's a skeleton in the rocking chair, and we animated that whole thing. That was cut for time, and
oh wow,
it ended up looking really cool. Like that went all the way through the animation process, was fully animated in Korea and sent back. But then the show was just too long at that point, I think. So it never got put on air. But yeah, hopefully that'll show up at some point, either on the internet or on Disney Plus as a special feature. Or yeah, we put a lot of work into that one sequence, and so it'd be cool to see that sort of see the light of day at some point. Yeah.
Oh, that's got to be horrible when you spend so much time on a sequence and it gets cut for time.
Yeah, I mean, you get used to it. It's fine. That's the thing with working in animation, and particularly on a show like The Simpsons, where it does go through the different phases of production, and you do end up drawing a couple of versions of each episode. And so you kind of get used to something being cut that you really liked in the beginning. Like on the Simpsons movie, that was like a continual work in progress as we were sort of polishing the jokes and figuring out, we were kind of almost figuring out the ins and outs of the story as we went. And so there was a lot of stuff that got cut out. I think I worked on like 2 whole sequences from the movie that never made it into the final cut.
What are those?
I can't really. I mean, there was one with Patty and Selma. Can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like Patty and Selma, and I think they were at a beauty salon or like it's too long ago. Like I can't really remember.
Yeah. It's getting it was like 15 years, I think now since the movie came out.
The movie came out in like 2006 or so, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a while ago now.
Yeah, it was. And I've noticed that the movie, they really cut out a lot of the 3rd, 4th tier characters and really honed in back on the Simpsons family, which I guess was a great idea because the TV show goes all over the place with the different characters. And so I was that was the one thing that kind of surprised me. They got back down to the core family in the script.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always the ethic of the show. The name of the show is The Simpsons, and so despite the fact that we do kind of go off and visit Principal Skinner, or we'll have a story about Superintendent Chalmers or something, it's always got to come back to the core, the family, the Simpsons family, and that's part of the reason why I think it did have this evolving kind of story where they were sort of like chipping away at a block of marble to get it down to the essential sculpture of here's what it's going to be. That's what James L. Brooks often brings to the table. He keeps it focused on the emotion and the family. That's been the focus of the show this whole time. So yeah.
Right. And I remember when that movie was about to come out, the hype for this thing, the hype train was so huge. And I really feel like you guys hit that note with fans. And I'm sure like leading up to that date, you guys are probably sweating it like, oh, I hope this will hit the right mark. And because it could have easily been panned by a bunch of comic book guys being like, oh, worst movie ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, when you're working this hard, like everybody on the movie busted their guts trying to get that thing done. Not only on the art side, but the writing side, and get it done for the release date. So obviously, we're all hoping that it has a good reception. I didn't have anything to do with like the marketing of the movie, but it was cool to see all the stuff that they were doing at the time with, I think they had tie-ins at 7-Eleven where you could, they actually turned 7-Eleven stores into Quickie Marts with like new signs and stuff. And they had like standees of characters, and they turned what do they call it, the Slurpee machine into a squishy machine and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool, and we were all excited about that, all that sort of marketing stuff as well as the viewing public.
Now I'm curious because The Simpsons, they're known for bringing in a lot of celebrities and things like that. Yeah. How does that all evolve? Do you have to get do you write the script and be like, okay, well, can we get the celebrity for this? Like, how does all that go down?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, it's different. It's different in every case. I directed the Lady Gaga episode, and that came about. I heard that James L. Brooks was a big fan of Lady Gaga, and so it was his idea to ask her if she wanted to be on the show, and then from there, the script evolved. Other times, like the writers will come up with a script, and they kind of have a wish list of like, oh, it would be great if we could get this actor to play this character, or sometimes they'll voice themselves, like it's actually like that personality comes to Springfield, like in the case of the Lady Gaga episode. Then they'll contact the actor or the personality's agent or representation and send them the script and ask them, we wrote this part for you, are you interested in doing it? And sometimes the celebrity will say yeah, because they're a fan of the show, but other times like they'll say no, not interested. And so then the writer has to then think like, oh, who else could we get to do it?
So now the way they appear in the show, now does they have to go through an approval process as well? Like they have to approve the look?
Yeah, you mean the design of the character? Yes. Yeah, that's all. That goes through, an initial sketch that is usually either done by a character designer or the animation director of the episode will sometimes already have an idea of, I want the character to look like this, and they'll do a little sketch. And then that gets sent to the writers and producers like Matt Groening, Al Jean, Matt Selman. They have to sign off on the design, and they'll make notes if they have any changes they want made. And then that comes back to us, and then we make those changes so that the design is then ready to go into production and be used by the animators.
Now, do you get to run into the celebrities when you're doing your job, or is that a different department?
No, I actually had to ask specifically when I found out that I was going to be directing the Lady Gaga episode. At that point, she was pretty new on the scene, but she was already like a big deal musically. And also, because she was known for, she had just shown up to the MTV Music Awards in that dress made of meat or something. And so she was this big deal. And so I had to specifically ask, is it possible for me to come to the record session to see her record? And so I did get, invited to the record session, and there were so many people at that recording session, like crammed into the
I bet.
The engineer's booth, just watching through the glass. It was really interesting to watch, actually, because James L. Brooks actually directed Lady Gaga and Yardley Smith at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Which isn't always done. Like, that's actually rarely done, is more than one actor recording their lines at the same time. I mean, it was great I did get to meet Lady Gaga, which was really fun. But it was also, like, what really impressed me was watching Yardley Smith and James L. Brooks work. Yardley, because James L. Brooks was very specific in his direction, and he made them do take after take after take because he really wanted to get the emotion right in those line readings. And so, he would say, okay, do it one more time, but just give me like 10% more sadness. And I'm sitting in the recording booth thinking like, I thought she did it great that last time. Like, why does she need to do it again? But then she would, Yardley would do it again. And she did give the line 10% more set. Like you could hear like, oh my God, she actually did it. Like she nailed it.
Now, are there any scenes that, okay, you get all the voiceover stuff, you're putting it together, and for whatever reason, the scene just isn't working and it doesn't come together like you want it to?
Not really. It sort of depends on the vocal performance. Very rarely do you get an actor's performance that is so vocally flat. You're just like, what am I going to do? Like, they're not giving me anything. And it's usually just the guest actors, more so often where the guest star is not an actor. It's just a public figure because they're not used to sort of making their voice sound interesting.
So now, of course, I grew up in the 80s, 90s, and the time span of the show has been so long, so many different tenures of directors and things like that. My favorite time frame was the Bill Oakley years, where you had Conan O'Brien, and just the gags were so hilarious. And I'm wondering, like, with you yourself, do you look back at that era and be like, we need to emulate that, or that's the bar that's set, or how do you view what came before?
That's an interesting question. I think everybody sort of has what they see as like the golden age of the show. And my theory is that whenever you first started watching, like whatever was on TV at the time you first started watching the show, that's what you most fondly remember as like, oh, this is when The Simpsons was at its best. So for me, I think seasons 3, 4, and 5 are like the golden years of the show. But my son started watching it when he was old enough to get the jokes and stuff. I didn't let him watch it when he was a little kid. But once he started watching it when he was about 12, I showed him those older episodes, but he was like, no, I like the ones now. I like the newer episodes.
Interesting.
And it's just because we switched to widescreen format when, after the movie. It's definitely like had its peaks and valleys, I think. But, they bring new writers on every so often. Personally, I think the shows that we've been doing for the last like 4 or 5 years, where I think we're back in a new kind of classic era of the show. Like so many of the episodes that we've done in the last 4 or 5 seasons have just been like these amazing, like, oh my God, this is a new classic episode. How did they not think of this idea? How have we not done this before? Like there was one where Krusty had to, like, he was wanted by the police and he had to hide out in a circus, which I think turned out fantastically well.
Yeah, so being in a show like season 36, what is the idea vetting process? I'm sure because you have a lot of episodes to be like, okay, well, that gets a little close to this episode, that episode.
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't know how the writers sort of choose. I know that at the beginning of every season, they do like a pitch meeting kind of thing where all the writers will pitch ideas like, well, I had an idea. What if Bart does this? Or what if Homer and Lisa went on a road trip to this place or whatever? And then they kind of, from that, they choose like, okay, this would make a great idea for an episode. I know that some ideas, they're like, well, that's a cool idea, but that's not going to be enough story to flesh out one whole episode. So why don't we couple that as a subplot with another idea that is also not going to be enough to flesh out a whole episode.
Right. And I've noticed too, and it's funny because it's one of those things where you don't notice it until it's pointed out to you. But it seems like the first 2 minutes are always this very disconnected from the rest of the story where they're like, okay, we're at a baseball game. And then the rest of the episode, it takes place somewhere else. It has nothing to do with the first 2 minutes. Is that like a built-in thing into the script now?
I don't think it's necessarily like a intentional mandated thing. Like, no, Simpsons formula is the first, the cold open has. I don't know how that came about, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. I mean, personally, I started to notice that more in the Mike Scully years. The Scully episodes where he was the executive producer and showrunner, to me, have more of a madcap, anything goes, let's just do whatever's funny kind of thing. That sort of feel to a lot of the episodes, whereas a showrunner like Matt Selman, who is currently like co-showrunner Al Jean right now, they feel like little mini movies in terms of everything kind of is like a puzzle piece. It's puzzle pieces interlocking together really well. So I think it just comes down to the individual showrunner and what their comedic sensibility and what their story sensibility is.
Now, do you ever get a script and they present to you a scene where you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to animate this? Does that ever happen?
Oh, yeah. Yes. All the time. Yeah. Like because the writers, they'll come up with ideas and they're not held back by any kind of notes or anything. They just like let their imaginations run wild. And then we have to work out like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? Like with the Lady Gaga episode, for instance, there was an idea that they wanted to have a dress, that she wore a dress made of hummingbirds in the formation of a dress. And then she clapped her hands and the hummingbirds flew away, revealing a different dress underneath. And so that was definitely a thing where I was like, how are we going to... What? Like, how are we going to do that in terms of animation? It's going to be so difficult to animate hundreds of hummingbirds in the shape of a dress. And so what we ended up doing was we animated 3 versions of hummingbirds in a wing flapping kind of cycle. And then we used a computer and then we did like a template of here's the shape of how the hummingbirds have to be on her body. And we just sort of kept her as still as possible in those scenes. And we just got a computer and basically used it as a sprite. And we just repeated it and filled that area with rows of hummingbirds. And then once the hummingbirds flew away, it became a particle system where it was just dissipating particles, but each particle was an animating hummingbird. So there's ways to do it, but certainly like with things like the Halloween episodes where we're always trying to come up with like new ideas and things to do different visually, that's always challenging to work out. Okay, they want, like we did an anime episode. It was like a parody of the anime Death Note. And the writer of the show wanted it in authentic anime style with all the characters looking like anime versions of themselves. And so we ended up just getting the animation studio that animated the Death Note anime to just animate that section of. So we used a different animation studio than the ones that we normally use in Korea for the regular show, just for that act.
Okay, and that's a good point because I know you guys have had like crossover episodes where you've had like Rick and Morty pop in.
Yeah.
Like how is that done? Do you get their animation studios to help out with that, or is it all on your end?
It varies episode by episode. Usually, like I know that when we did the Family Guy crossover, and the Family Guy characters visited Springfield, but then in the Family Guy episode, the Simpsons visited Quahog or whatever their town's called. And that was just a simple matter of we just got the Family Guy model sheets that they use on their show, and we gave our model sheets to the Family Guy crew. So they got the models right, but it was really just left to our crew to draw the Family Guy characters and their crew to draw the Simpsons characters. And so you can see when you watch each of those episodes that even though it's the Simpsons, they are being animated in that Family Guy style. Like the Family Guy style of animation is sort of different from the Simpsons. It's very much like faster walks to, the speed of the characters walking is a lot faster to just get them in place. And then they'll just stand there and they just talk. and they'll just lift a hand like this and lift a hand like this and then lift two hands like this. Whereas our animation style is just the timing and the acting gestures and stuff is much different. So we animated the Family Guy characters in more that acting style for the Simpsons episode, but they animated the Simpsons characters in more the Family Guy style of acting for their episodes. So each situation is different. I don't know what happened with the Rick and Morty thing.
It was like it was the opener.
Yeah, the couch gag. So that's what I was just going to say. With the couch gags, it's different because we've had guest couch gag animators like John Cristofalusi, who was the creator of Ren and Stimpy.
Yep.
Bill Plimpton has done a number of different couch gags for us. And so with those, that's just left with the devices of that animator. Like, we don't have anything to do with it.
Interesting.
It's just like, hey, do you want to do a couch gag? And they say yes or no. And then they will actually storyboard, like, here's what we want it to look like. And we don't really have anything to do with it beyond just maybe seeing it in the storyboard stage and saying like, oh, do you maybe not want to do this or that? But those couch gags are sort of self-contained. And we don't really have that much to do with the actual animating of those.
Gotcha. Now, leading up to because you mentioned the Family Guy crossover, leading up to that, what was the atmosphere in the studio? Was like, oh, this is gonna be really cool.
Honestly, I don't really remember. I think that at that point, like, a lot of ex-Simpsons artists had gone to work on Family Guy.
Oh, really?
So a lot of the Family Guy crew was people that we knew and already had worked on The Simpsons. So that was why I don't think the Simpsons crew was particularly worried or apprehensive about like, oh my God, what is Family Guy going to do to our characters? Are they not going to do it right or whatever? Because, I mean, a lot of the Family Guy people had already worked on The Simpsons. So they knew how to draw the characters and stuff. And so I think there was just sort of like it was a sort of a sense of camaraderie, maybe a slight friendly rivalry. But yeah, again, it was a long time ago now, so it's hard to remember exactly.
The one episode that stands out for me this year is the one that was, I think it was the season premiere, where it was like the season end, or the end of the series. Yeah. I thought that was great.
Yeah, that was a really clever idea for, not only that they're actually doing like a quote season finale, a series finale episode, but that it was going to be the season opener was the last Simpsons episode ever. So I thought that was really clever.
Right.
And to see it go from storyboards and then see the finished product, it turned out great. I really enjoyed that one.
Oh, absolutely. Now, are you guys hoping for another movie?
I'm happy to work on whatever they want me to work on. I don't have any inside intel on whether there's a movie or not coming.
I know there's rumors always springing up.
Yeah, personally, this is just me saying like my opinion, but I would think that since Disney bought The Simpsons, they would want to do another movie, just in the same way that when they bought Star Wars, it's like, guess what? We just bought Star Wars and we're making 9 more movies. It's like, you would think they're going to want to do another movie at some point, but I don't know whether those discussions have been had. Maybe there is something being worked on, but, as the saying goes, like, that's way above my pay grade. So
Gotcha.
That's not to say it's never going to happen. And personally, like, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point there is another movie because of just the financial kind of thing involved with Disney buying the show is like, well, they obviously want to use that property. We'll see.
Yeah, I've noticed they've done a lot with you guys because they've put all kinds of little 5-minute little clips on Disney Plus, and so they're just trying to get as much work out of you as possible.
Oh, yes. Yes.
But I noticed too, like with the style of the movie, like the animation style of the movie, you always want to go just a little bit more than the TV show. And in terms of like shading and just the overall quality. And of course, we saw the same thing back when we were growing up with movies in the 90s. The technology of the animation was always a little bit better than what you saw on TV. So was that a concern when you were working on that?
Oh, yeah, that was an absolute conscious decision for the movie. Was they were like, this is the first time The Simpsons is going to be on widescreen. So up to that point, we were still working in the 4:3 aspect ratio for the TV show.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah.
And the widescreen was specifically for the movie. And so that was a real adjustment for all of us, because when you're composing an image in a rectangle that's almost a square is very different from a 16:9 aspect ratio. And so I can remember trying to adjust to that new wider screen. We're like, well, where do I place things? Like, this is weird. Like, I've got so much extra space. And then also we wanted to put more detail into stuff like the backgrounds and the coloring on the characters. And also the animation was more fluid. We actually hired a bunch of ex-Disney feature animators and feature artists to work on the Simpsons movie to give it feature animated quality. So a bunch of our artists who came on for the movie are still on the show. And that's why we sort of adjusted the TV show to now it's widescreen, and there's more variation in color because we use computer coloring. That was also introduced for the movie. And so, yeah, that was definitely a concern and something we consciously tried to level the visuals up on every count for the movie, just to make it, we wanted it to be like an impressive theatrical experience.
Oh, yeah, you guys pulled it off amazingly. I remember even when you came back from the movie, like the opener was even like you took little scenes from the movie.
Yes,
and
that's right.
That's right. Intro.
Yeah.
So that was great. So yeah, Matt's not here for his health here. He's actually promoting Steamroller Man, which is a side. Is it like a side comic that you're doing?
Yeah, I work on that in my spare time. It's a superhero comedy comic. It's very much in the vein of The Tick or Venture Brothers. Batman 66 has that sort of vibe. And so I did a Kickstarter last year to print the first issue. But I've put everything that I've done online to read for free. So you can read that at steamrollerman.com. There's a couple of other places online that also host the comic, and those can be found at linktree/steamrollerman. So yeah, I'd love everyone who's listening to check it out.
Yeah, and you have to check it out because he has a steamroller for a head. And that right there should just entice you to go look at it. Now, how often are you rolling out new episodes or new artwork?
I'm doing it as fast as I can, because I'm doing all this in my spare time. So I'm starting to do comic conventions and stuff. So I'm sort of...
Oh, nice.
I work on the comic and the comic related stuff for about an hour to an hour and a half every morning before I start my day job on The Simpsons. And so in that time, I'm either doing pages of the comic or designing a convention banner or applying for a comic convention table or whatever. So yeah, the short answer is I just get the pages out as quickly as I can do them. I've done over 100 pages that are available online.
Wow. Okay.
And planning a Kickstarter to print issue 2, which is all done. And issue 3 is almost all done. I've got one more page in issue 3 to do. And so basically just as fast as I can get them out.
Well, it looks great. I wish you the best of luck for that. Yeah, I see in the background there you have like little action figures and things like that.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge comic book fan.
Gotcha. Well, I saw that Jack Specific has picked up the Simpsons license, so I don't know if you've seen like the figures that they've done. Yeah, they look amazing. because I know Playmates had the license.
Playmates
way back when.
had it for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've taken some of the figures like Otto and put them side by side, and there's just like the Jack specific version just blows the old one away. I'm like, wow, how'd this old one ever pass for Otto? It just night and day difference. So if you ever
check it out,
yeah, they're amazing. So they do a good job with the Simpsons license for sure.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll have a look.
All right, Matt, thank you so much for being a guest on Geek Time. Really appreciate your time.
Me.
Good luck with Steamroller Man. And for all you guys out there, make sure you check it out, steamrollerman.com. Thanks again, Matt.
Thank you.
Warning. Geek Time will return after these messages.
All right, Geek Time fans, if you're a huge fan of Geek Time, we now have Geek Time shirts available. On the link below, you can get your own Geek Time shirts, and they look incredible. Now, there's 2 designs I couldn't pick between, so I'm like, oh, heck, I'll just make them both available for sale. So,
is it my face in neon?
Yes.
Woohoo!
So we've got shirts. Tim, I got you a shirt as well, so I know you're going to be wearing that all over town.
Heck yeah. I'll wear it next episode. You won't see me, but I'll be wearing it next episode.
You and me both. So yeah, get your Geek Time shirts now. Available at Teespring in the Irate Gamer store. All right, so for all you retro video game fans out there, there is a new arcade machine out called the Evercade. That's a bar top arcade machine. This one, what makes it unique is it has different cartridges that you can stick in the bottom, so you don't have to play the same ones like Pac-Man or Burger Time. If you get bored with it, like with the like you buy the arcade 1-up machines, you're stuck with those games. But with the Evercade, you could take the cartridge out, put a different one in, and play a whole new set of games. And it's got a marquee that lights up. It's amazing. I was playing around with this. I'm like, oh, this is so neat with all the bells and whistles.
Can you eat dinner on it?
Yes, you can, but I wouldn't suggest
I feel like I'm
that.
an old pizzeria.
One of the cool things about this machine is that they have different artwork machines that you can pick up, and they sent me the one that has Mega Man all over it, because I guess there are some Mega Man arcade games, which are kind of like brawlers. It's kind of like Street Fighter, but with Mega Man characters. And then, of course, when you get bored with that, take it out, put it in Burger Time, and boy, I love me some Burger Time.
Burger Time. Do they actually have Burger Time?
I know.
Tell me they have Burger Time.
There's not going to be a Geek Time episode that goes by that I don't mention Burger Time. Let's do this.
Love Burger Time, man.
So, all right, check out Evercade. They're in places like Best Buys, Amazons. So get yours today.
This is Richard Horvitz from Invader Zim telling you to stop tuning into Geek Time, you puny mortal.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to Geek Time, Season 1, Episode 5, and that was an incredible interview with Matthew. All right, so now we're going to head over into our Tim segment.
I don't think so, Tim.
Tim. I don't think so, Tim. What you got for us?
So this week, man, this is something that I overheard. It's probably old news to some people who are really into the loop of this, but I found out that the DC Warner Brothers told Zack Snyder to not use Green Lantern in the Justice League movie intentionally. And that was not a choice by his. That's why in the Snyder cut, he does have a Green Lantern show up in like the prequel bit. But they were so bothered by the 2011 Ryan Reynolds movie, they kind of are scared to do anything Green Lantern. This is a symptom of don't have your movie cost $300 million. There was no way that movie was going to make its money back. And this is what we're seeing now with movies like Captain America, Brave New World. When you have all these reshoots and you spend more and more money on shining a turd, it's only going to have a potential ceiling to make so much of that back.
You can't handle the truth.
I blame Martin Campbell, the director, on that movie, to be perfectly fair. I don't think he liked the source material.
Yeah, that would make sense because you had the origin story for Hal Jordan already there. All you had to do is take the source material and turn it into a movie. Like, it was there. Yeah, and I think Tim is bringing this up because there was a lot of news this week on the Green Lantern TV show that is coming out.
Yes.
And it seems like they've got the cast now in place. Hal Jordan, they've got Kyle Chandler, and I looked all these people up because I was like, I love Green Lantern. It's one of my favorite franchises.
Yeah, you are
in the
Green
DC
Lantern
universe.
Mark, 100%, absolutely.
Yeah, so I had to look these people up, and they do look like their parts. So this Kyle Chandler, I think, will be a great as Hal. They've got Ulrich Thompson as Sinestro, and I'm thinking, okay, put him in lavender pink makeup, whatever that is. I think he could be a dead ringer for Sinestro. The only one I have trouble with, though, is Aaron Pierre as John Stewart. I don't know if he looks exactly like what I'm thinking John Stewart should be, but I'll give him a chance and do not mess this up.
They're not doing a movie. This is a TV series, correct?
Yeah,
this is a HBO Max TV series. Again, they are so scared by this property because of a lackluster movie they made over almost 15 years ago now. That movie should have made people like me into people like you. It should have made people like me actually want to check out more Green Lantern, and it really didn't.
Yes, and of course, with the Green Lantern comic, I am so upset right now because they relaunched Green Lantern from issue number 1 again about a year and a half ago. And I was waiting for a story good enough to jump back on board because they've been pretty lame the last couple of years. When they reset the number back to 1, they had a really great storyline. Hal Jordan came back to Earth. He was dealing with some psychological issues. And everything went along smoothly up until issue 12. And then once it cranked over to issue 13, they probably brought on some storyboard people. And the comic just went downhill after that. So that should have been my freaking out because I'm freaking out over this. I'm just like, what are you doing? They're bringing in storylines that I don't care about, people I don't care about. It's like, get back to what you were doing in issues 1 through 12. DC, I don't know what the hell's going on over there because I've been jumping into like Superman, Batman periodically to see what's going on. It's horrible. I'm sick of these storylines. Well, I don't know what they're doing. They're bringing all these weird people. Like I don't know if it's just the millennial generation, but you're killing me, man. You're killing me.
No, God, please, no.
But so pathetic. I hate it. All right, so switching gears to some football. As you know, the Super Bowl is fast approaching, and I'm making an announcement here that next week we're going to be talking about all things Super Bowl. I've got a couple Super Bowl related guests lined up for next episode, and you do not want to miss this one because we get into some interesting franchises wrapped around in the whole commercialdom that was so synonymous with the Super Bowl in the 1980s. All right, with that, that's going to wrap up this episode of Geek Time, Season 1, Episode 5. A special thanks to Matthew Schofield for stopping by. Great interview, and thanks for another Tim Time episode as well. So, all right, make sure you check out next week's episode. We'll be back with all kinds of Super Bowl goodness.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Geek Time.